Daniel MacPherson didn't just train for 𝗣𝗟𝗧. He lived like a professional fighter for 2 straight years. We're talking brutal daily sessions in Thai boxing, wrestling, and jiu-jitsu, pushing his body to the edge until even real fighters on set couldn't believe he wasn't one of them. And here's the kicker. Nearly 90% of the fight scenes you see in 𝗣𝗟𝗧 are performed by the actors themselves. No hiding behind stunt doubles, no shortcuts, just raw, punishing realism captured on camera. Today, we're diving deep into 𝗣𝗟𝗧, from the casting secrets to the production challenges you may have missed. Stick around, you're about to see the movie like never before. And if you love behind-the-scenes stories like this, hit the like button, subscribe to Cinemagna, and drop a comment below on your favorite fight movie of all time. 𝗣𝗟𝗧 is not just another fight film. On paper, it might sound familiar. A fallen champion, a comeback story, one last shot at redemption. But what makes this film stand out is how deeply personal it is, both on screen and behind the scenes. Directed by Tyler Atkins and written by David Frigerio alongside Russell Crowe himself, 𝗣𝗟𝗧 tells the story of Patton James, a once feared MMA fighter who walked away from the sport after spending years incarcerated. Now living a quieter life as a husband and father, Patton is pulled back into the cage when his younger brother is brutally injured by a reigning champion who wants to erase his legacy completely. The stakes are simple: win or lose everything. But what elevates this story beyond the typical sports drama is the emotional core. This isn't just about fighting in a cage, it's about fighting yourself, your past, your regrets, your identity. And that emotional depth starts with the director. Tyler Atkins didn't approach 𝗣𝗟𝗧 as just another action project. He brought his own life into it. His own experiences with struggle, redemption, and searching for belonging shaped the film's DNA. For him, this story wasn't about spectacle, it was about survival, about what it means to carry the weight of your past while still trying to move forward. And you feel that in every frame. The film explores Patton not just as a fighter, but as a man trying to rebuild his life. His relationship with his wife, Luciana, becomes a powerful emotional anchor. She sees him losing himself again, slipping back into a world she knows could destroy him. That tension between love and survival gives the story real weight. Then there's Sammy, played by Russell Crowe. Not just a trainer, but a mentor, a father figure, and in many ways a mirror to Patton's own struggles. Their relationship is layered with history, pain, and a kind of tough love that only comes from years of shared battles. And speaking of Russell Crowe, his involvement in this film goes far beyond acting. This project actually took shape during another film shoot. While working on Land of Bad, Crowe and writer-producer David Frigerio were already deep in creative mode, rewriting scenes, pushing characters, refining ideas. In the middle of that intensity, Frigerio pitched 𝗣𝗟𝗧 to Crowe. Crowe's response? Classic. He told him straight up, "There's a good story there, but we can make it great. When can you get to Sydney?" And just like that, everything changed. Frigerio booked a one-way flight from Los Angeles that same night. 15 hours later, he was sitting with Crowe, diving into the script. What followed was 2 weeks of relentless work, 18-hour days, scene after scene being built, torn apart, and rebuilt again. This wasn't casual rewriting, this was obsession. They weren't just crafting dialogue, they were digging into themes, legacy, redemption, the cost of greatness. They even pulled from real-world influences, like legendary boxing trainer 𝗗𝗟𝗏 to shape the philosophy behind the characters. By the end of it, 𝗣𝗟𝗧 wasn't just a script anymore. It was something alive, something with purpose, and that intensity carried into casting. Daniel MacPherson as Patton is the heart of the film, and his transformation is nothing short of insane. He didn't just prepare for the role, he committed to it like an actual athlete. Strict diet, daily training, physical and mental conditioning. For 2 years. Let that sink in. 2 years of training before cameras even rolled. Fight coordinator Igor Breakenbach worked with him extensively, focusing on technical precision and realism. Every movement had to feel authentic. Every strike had to look like it came from a real fighter, and it paid off. Even experienced martial artists on set were shocked by how quickly MacPherson adapted. His performance doesn't feel like acting, it feels lived in, earned. Russell Crowe himself noticed it early. He had already worked with MacPherson before, and he saw the growth. He knew this role would push him to another level. But what's interesting is that Crowe also played a mentor off-screen. MacPherson came in with that hunger, that mindset of, I can outwork everyone, I can push harder than anyone else. Crowe's advice? It's a marathon, not a sprint. Because in a film like this, burnout is real. Injuries are real. You're not just acting, you're putting your body through actual punishment. And that authenticity extends to the entire cast. Bren Foster, who plays the reigning champion 𝗣𝗟𝗗𝗏, is not just an actor. He's a real-life martial artist with 8 world championship titles, a black belt in multiple disciplines, a fighter who understands not just the physical side of combat, but the psychology behind it. He didn't just perform in the film, he helped choreograph the fights, and that's a huge deal, because it means the fights weren't designed just to look cool. They were designed to feel real, strategic, brutal, unpredictable. Director Tyler Atkins leaned heavily on Foster to bring that authenticity to life. And according to the producers, his ability to translate the beauty of martial arts onto screen was unmatched. Then there's Mojin Arya, who plays Patton's younger brother Maylan. His character is the catalyst for everything, the rising fighter whose devastating injury pulls Patton back into the world he tried to leave behind. Arya himself connected deeply with the story. He saw something missing in cinema, a true representation of Australian MMA culture. And Beast gave him that opportunity. Even the supporting cast adds layers of realism. George Burgess, a former professional rugby player, brings physical presence and authenticity to his role as Neil. Kelly Gale as Luciana grounds the film emotionally, representing the cost of violence on the people who love these fighters. And then there's Amy Shark, making her film debut. Imagine stepping into your first acting role, and it's alongside Russell Crowe. She described it as a pinch-me moment, and honestly, who wouldn't? But here's where things get even more intense. The production didn't just aim for realism, it demanded it. The filmmakers partnered with One Championship, the largest martial arts organization in the world. And for the final fight scene, they didn't fake the crowd, they filmed it live, in front of 10,000 people. Think about that. No controlled set, no quiet environment, real crowd, real energy, real pressure. The actors had to perform in that environment after years of training. Every punch, every movement, every reaction amplified by thousands of people watching. And that's what gives the film its edge. You're not just watching a fight, you're feeling it. The cinematography plays a huge role in that immersion. Shot across Australia and Thailand, the film uses contrasting environments to reflect Patton's internal state. The raw coastal landscapes of Australia, harsh, isolated, unforgiving. Then the vibrant, chaotic energy of Thailand, alive, intense, overwhelming. The camera work blends handheld shots, Steadicam movement, and drone footage to create a balance between intimacy and scale. You feel close to the characters, but also aware of the world pressing in on them. And the use of super speed lenses adds another layer. It captures subtle emotional details while still handling high-speed action. It's not just about showing the fight, it's about putting you inside it. And underneath all of this is a deeper theme. This film isn't really about MMA. It's about the human condition, about broken families, about forgiveness, about trying to find your way back when you've lost yourself. The director described fighters as modern-day gladiators, people who give everything to their craft through discipline and repetition. But behind that, there's pain. There's sacrifice. There's a constant battle happening off the mat. And that's what Beast captures so well. The fights are just the surface. The real story is everything underneath. And as you'll see in the next part, the production challenges, the physical toll on the cast, and the insane level of commitment it took to bring this film to life pushed everyone involved to their absolute limits. What most people don't realize is that making a film like Beast doesn't just test your acting ability. It tests your body, your discipline, and your willingness to suffer for authenticity. And on this set, suffering wasn't avoided. It was part of the process. Because from day one, the mission was clear. No shortcuts. Director Tyler Atkins made it very clear that he didn't want to lie to the audience. He wasn't interested in creating a polished, overly choreographed version of MMA that looked good but felt fake. He wanted the grit, the sweat, the exhaustion, the kind of physical storytelling where you can almost feel the impact of every strike. And to achieve that, the cast had to go through something most actors would never sign up for. We're talking about full immersion training. Daniel MacPherson didn't just learn how to throw punches, he studied the entire ecosystem of mixed martial arts. The footwork, the grappling transitions, the stamina required to survive multiple rounds, and most importantly, the mindset. Because fighting isn't just physical, it's psychological. You're dealing with fear, pressure, pain, fatigue, and the constant awareness that one mistake can end everything. That mentality had to be real, so the training wasn't just about technique, it was about conditioning the mind to operate under stress. Long sessions, repetition, controlled chaos. And then, just when the actors thought they were ready, they were thrown into rooms full of real fighters. Not performers, not stunt doubles, actual professionals. MacPherson himself admitted that the set was filled with fighters who were kicking our asses day in and day out. And instead of backing away from that, the cast leaned into it. Because that's the only way this film works. You can't fake exhaustion, you can't fake pain, and you definitely can't fake what it feels like to be physically overwhelmed in a fight. So they embraced it. And what that created was something rare. A fight film where the actors don't just look like fighters, they move like them. They react like them. They carry themselves like people who've spent years in the cage. Even the stunt team had to adjust their approach. Normally, stunt coordinators step in to protect actors and carry a lot of the physical load. But on Beast, the actors were already operating at such a high level that the stunt team shifted into more of a refinement role. Instead of replacing the actors, they worked with them. They took their instincts, their movements, their understanding of the sport, and built choreography around it. Which is why the fights feel so unpredictable. They don't feel like rehearsed sequences, they feel like real combat. And then there's Bren Foster. If MacPherson brought the dedication, Foster brought the danger. Because when you have a real-life world champion stepping into a role like 𝗗𝗟𝗗𝗏, you're not just acting against someone, you're facing someone who actually knows how to hurt you. Foster's background in multiple martial arts disciplines gave him a level of control and precision that elevated every fight scene. He understood not just how to execute techniques, but how to make them look brutal on camera without crossing the line into actual injury. That balance is incredibly difficult. Too safe and it looks fake. Too real and someone gets hurt. But Foster walked that line perfectly. And according to the director, he became one of the most important collaborators in bringing authenticity to the film. Because he wasn't just performing, he was shaping the language of the fights, and that language had to match the emotional stakes of the story. Because in Beast, every fight means something. This isn't about random opponents or flashy highlights. Every moment in the cage is tied to something deeper, a family, a debt, a past that refuses to stay buried. Which brings us to one of the most powerful aspects of the film, the emotional thread running through it. Tyler Atkins made a deliberate choice to ground the story in something more than competition. He looked at the real lives of fighters, the broken families, the difficult upbringings, the sense of searching for belonging, and he noticed something interesting. For many fighters, the gym becomes more than just a place to train. It becomes a sanctuary, a place where discipline replaces chaos, where structure replaces instability, where pain is transformed into purpose. And that idea is deeply embedded in Beast. Patton isn't just fighting to win a title. He's fighting to reclaim something he lost, his identity, his sense of self, his place in the world. And that's why the relationships in the film matter so much. 𝗗𝗟𝗏𝗧, his wife, represents stability. She represents the life he built outside of the cage, the life he risks losing every time he steps back into that world. And her resistance to his return isn't just fear, it's understanding. She knows what fighting takes, not just physically, but emotionally. Then there's Sammy. Russell Crowe's character is the bridge between Patton's past and his potential future. A mentor who understands the cost of greatness because he's seen it up close. And Crowe brings a level of gravitas to that role that can't be taught, because he's lived it. Not as a fighter, but as someone who's pushed himself to extremes in his own career. From physically demanding roles like Cinderella Man to the intensity of Gladiator, he understands what it means to commit fully to something. And that experience shows up in subtle ways, in how he delivers advice, in how he observes, in how he pushes without forcing. There's a moment behind the scenes where Crowe tells MacPherson something that perfectly captures the philosophy of the film. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And that line applies to everything, to fighting, to life, to redemption. Because change doesn't happen overnight. It's built over time, through repetition, through failure, through persistence. And that idea is reflected in the way the film was made. Nothing about this production was rushed. From the script development, to the casting, to the training, everything was built layer by layer. Even the environments were chosen with intention. Australia and Thailand weren't just random locations. They were emotional landscapes. Australia's harsh coastal terrain reflects isolation, distance, the feeling of being cut off from the world. Thailand, on the other hand, brings intensity, energy, a sense of being overwhelmed by everything happening around you. Together, they create a visual contrast that mirrors Patton's internal journey. And the cinematography amplifies that. The use of handheld cameras puts you right inside the action. You feel the instability, the unpredictability, the chaos. Steadicam shots bring moments of control, of focus, of clarity. And the drone work expands the scale, reminding you that this story exists in a much larger world. It's a constant push and pull between intimacy and spectacle, between the internal and the external, and that balance is what makes the film feel alive. But here's something else that adds another layer of realism. The final fight wasn't just filmed in front of a live audience. It was filmed in a real one-championship arena, surrounded by actual fighters, officials, and fans who understand the sport at the highest level. That means there was no room for error. You can't fake your way through a performance like that when the people watching know exactly what real fighting looks like. Every movement had to be precise. Every reaction had to be believable. And that pressure, that energy, it translates directly onto the screen. Because when you're performing in front of 10,000 people, something changes. Your adrenaline spikes. Your focus sharpens, your instincts take over. And that's exactly what the filmmakers wanted. They didn't want controlled performances. They wanted real reactions, real intensity, real stakes, and that's what you get. But even with all this realism, all this intensity, all this physical commitment, the film never loses sight of its core message. That fighting isn't just about defeating an opponent, it's about confronting yourself, your fears, your regrets, your past. Because at the end of the day, the most important battles in Beast aren't fought in the cage. They're fought in quiet moments, in conversations, in decisions, in the space between who you were and who you're trying to become. And as we move into the next part, we're going to break down even more of the behind-the-scenes details, from the technical filmmaking choices to the hidden layers in character design, and the subtle decisions that make this film hit harder than you expect. Because trust me, there's a lot more going on beneath the surface. What really separates Beast from most fight films isn't just the realism or the performances, it's the attention to detail in the filmmaking itself. The kind of detail you don't consciously notice while watching, but you feel it the entire time. Because every creative choice, from the camera lenses to the costumes to the way scenes are edited, was designed to pull you deeper into Patton's world. Let's start with the visuals. Cinematographer 𝗗𝗟𝗧 approached this film with a very specific philosophy. He didn't want the camera to feel like an observer. He wanted it to feel like a participant. That's why so much of the film uses handheld work. There's a slight instability to it, a constant movement that mirrors the unpredictability of fighting and life. You're never fully settled, never completely comfortable. And when the film shifts into Steadicam, you feel it immediately. Those moments become more controlled, more focused, almost like stepping into a fighter's mindset when everything slows down and sharpens right before impact. Then there's the use of super-speed lenses. Now, this is where things get really interesting. These lenses allow for incredibly shallow depth of field, meaning the background falls away and all your attention is pulled directly onto the character, their eyes, their expression, their emotion. It creates a sense of isolation. Even when Patton is surrounded by people, the world feels distant, blurred, like he's trapped inside his own head. And that's not accidental. That's storytelling through optics. Because this film is just as much about internal conflict as it is about physical combat. And then you have the drone work, which expands everything. Suddenly you're pulled out of that tight, claustrophobic space and shown the scale of the world around him. The arenas, the landscapes, the environments that feel almost overwhelming. It's a visual reminder that Patton's fight isn't happening in isolation. It's happening in a world that keeps moving, whether he's ready or not. And that contrast between intimacy and scale is one of the film's strongest visual tools. But visuals alone don't carry a film like this. The production design plays a huge role in grounding everything. Sam Hobbs, the production designer, focused on creating environments that feel lived in, real, authentic. Nothing feels overly polished. The gyms aren't pristine, they're worn, used, filled with history. You can almost smell the sweat embedded in the mats. The homes feel personal, imperfect, like real spaces where real people live. Because this story isn't about perfection, it's about struggle. And that extends into the costumes as well. Nicola Dunn, the costume designer, approached wardrobe not as fashion, but as character storytelling. Patton's clothing reflects his transition between worlds. Outside the cage, his look is grounded, functional, subtle. Inside the cage, everything changes. Now it's about identity, about presence, about stepping into a version of himself he tried to leave behind. Even small details, like how worn a piece of clothing looks, or how it fits after intense training, contribute to that authenticity. Because fighters don't look pristine, they look lived in. And then there's the makeup and physical transformation. Holly Anderson, the hair and makeup designer, focused on enhancing realism rather than glamorizing it. Bruises aren't just visual effects. They evolve, they change over time, swelling, fading, layering. Because in real fights, damage accumulates. And that continuity is something audiences might not consciously track. But it makes the experience feel real. It makes the pain believable. Now let's talk about editing, because this is where everything comes together. Editor Todd E. Miller had the challenge of balancing two very different rhythms, the chaos of fight sequences and the quiet intensity of character moments. And the key was contrast. The fights are fast, sharp, disorienting at times. Cuts come quickly, movements overlap. You're pulled into the intensity. But then the film slows down. And when it does, it really slows down. Moments linger. Silences stretch. You're forced to sit with the characters, their decisions, their emotions. And that pacing creates impact. Because when the next fight hits, it feels even more intense. It's not just action, it's release. And underneath all of that is the music. Brian Caccia's score doesn't overpower the film. It supports it. It builds tension where needed. It pulls back when the emotion needs space. And in the fight scenes, it works with the sound design to create a rhythm that almost feels like a heartbeat. Because fighting has a rhythm, breathing, movement, impact. And the music taps into that. But here's something a lot of people overlook. The real authenticity of Beast doesn't just come from the technical side, it comes from the philosophy behind it. the way the filmmakers understand fighters, because this film doesn't portray fighters as invincible. It shows them as human, flawed, vulnerable, searching. Tyler Atkins talked about how many fighters come from broken backgrounds, difficult childhoods, unstable environments, and for them, fighting becomes structure. It becomes purpose. It becomes a way to make sense of chaos. And that idea is woven into every character. Patton isn't just fighting for a title, he's fighting for redemption. Maylan, his younger brother, represents ambition, the hunger to rise, but also the risk that comes with it. Xavier is something else entirely. He's not just an opponent, he's a symbol of everything Patton fears becoming: ruthless, unforgiving, obsessed with dominance. And what makes Xavier so compelling is that he's not written as a simple villain. He believes in what he's doing. He's chasing his own version of greatness. And that makes the conflict more powerful, because it's not just good versus bad, it's two different philosophies colliding. And then there's Gabriel Stone, the manager, a character that represents the business side of fighting, the deals, the manipulation, the pressure to perform, because behind every fight, there's an industry. And that industry doesn't always care about the fighters themselves. It cares about spectacle, about profit, about what sells. And that tension adds another layer to the story. Because Patton isn't just fighting an opponent, he's fighting a system, one that once built him up and then left him behind. Now here's something that really stands out: the film's commitment to blending real-world elements into the story. This isn't a fictionalized version of MMA detached from reality. It's deeply connected to the actual sport. Real referees, real fighters, real organizations. Even figures like Herb Dean and Demetrius Johnson appear as themselves, grounding the film in authenticity. And that choice does something important. It removes the barrier between fiction and reality. You're not just watching a movie, you're watching something that feels like it exists within the real MMA world. And that makes every moment hit harder, because it feels possible, it feels real. But even with all this realism, the film never forgets its emotional core. Because at the end of the day, Beast isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how much you can endure, how much you can carry, how much you can survive, and whether you can find your way back after everything falls apart. And as we move into the final part, we're going to bring everything together: the impact of the film, the legacy it aims to leave behind, and why Beast might be one of the most emotionally grounded fight films we've seen in years. Because this story isn't just about fighting. It's about becoming. What makes Beast linger with you long after the final bell isn't just the fights, it's what those fights represent. Because by the time you reach the final act, something shifts. This is no longer a comeback story. It becomes a confrontation, not just between Patton and Xavier, but between who Patton was and who he's trying to become. And that's where the film's deeper meaning really takes hold. Throughout the story, Patton is pulled in two directions. On one side, there's the life he's built, his wife, his child, a chance at something stable, something honest. On the other side, there's the cage, the place where he once felt alive, where he had purpose, where everything made sense, but also the place that nearly destroyed him. And what the film does so well is refuse to make that choice simple, because it isn't. There's no clean answer, no obvious right path, just consequences. And that's what gives the final fight its weight. It's not just about winning, it's about what winning actually means. Because if Patton wins, what does he gain? Redemption? Closure? Or does he risk losing everything he fought to rebuild? And if he loses, what does that say about him? About his legacy? About the years he spent trying to become something more than his past? These are the questions the film quietly asks, without ever spelling them out. And that restraint is powerful, because it trusts the audience. It lets you sit in that tension. It lets you feel it. And that's something a lot of films don't do anymore. They explain too much. They resolve everything neatly. But Beast understands that real life doesn't work that way. Real life is messy, complicated, unfinished. And that's exactly how this story feels. Even the way the final fight is constructed reflects that. It's not just a showcase of skill, it's a war of attrition. Every round takes something out of Patton. Physically, you see the damage, but emotionally, you feel the cost. Every punch absorbed, every moment of hesitation, every decision to keep going when stopping would be easier. Because that's what fighting really is. It's not about domination, it's about endurance. And that idea ties directly into the film's core message, that the real battle isn't against your opponent, it's against yourself, your doubt, your fear, your past, and whether you can move forward without being consumed by it. What's interesting is how this message echoes the way the film itself was made, because everything about this production was built on endurance. From the 2-year training process to the intense script development sessions between Russell Crowe and David Frigerio, to the physical demands placed on the cast during filming. Nothing about this was easy. Nothing about it was rushed. It was earned. And that authenticity is what gives the film its impact. Because when you watch it, you're not just seeing a story, you're seeing the result of real commitment, real sacrifice, real effort. Even the decision to film the final fight in front of a live audience speaks to that. That wasn't the easiest option. It wasn't the safest, but it was the most honest, because it forced everyone involved to rise to the moment, to perform under pressure, to deliver something real. And that energy carries through to the audience. You feel it. You feel the stakes. You feel the tension. You feel the unpredictability. And that's what makes the climax work. Not just as a spectacle, but as an emotional release. Because by that point, you're invested. You understand what's at stake. You understand what Patton is risking. And you understand that no matter the outcome, he's changed. And that's the real victory. Not the title, not the recognition, but the transformation. Because at the start of the film, Patton is running from his past, trying to suppress it, ignore it, pretend it doesn't define him. But by the end, he faces it, head on. And in doing so, he reclaims control over his life, over his identity, over his future. And that's what makes Beast more than just a fight film. It's a story about ownership, about taking responsibility for who you are and choosing who you want to become, even if that journey is painful, even if it costs you something. And that idea extends beyond the main character. You see it in Luciana, her struggle to protect her family while supporting the man she loves. You see it in Sammy, a mentor dealing with his own limitations, trying to pass on everything he's learned before it's too late. You see it in Malin, a fighter chasing greatness and paying the price for it. And even in Xavier, a man so driven by dominance that he's willing to cross lines others won't. Every character is fighting something, not just physically, but internally. And that's what gives the film its depth, because it reminds you that everyone is dealing with their own battles, some visible, some not. Now, from a broader perspective, Beast also positions itself within a lineage of great fight films. You can feel the influence of classics like Rocky, Warrior, and The Fighter, films that use combat as a vehicle for deeper storytelling. But what Beast does differently is lean harder into authenticity, into realism, into the idea that this world doesn't need to be exaggerated to be compelling. It's already intense enough, already emotional enough, already human enough. And that approach sets it apart, because instead of trying to outdo other films in terms of spectacle, it focuses on truth, on honesty, on emotional resonance. And that's what makes it memorable. Not just the fights, but the feeling it leaves you with. That sense of having witnessed something real, something grounded, something that reflects parts of your own life, even if you've never stepped into a cage. Because at its core, this film is about something we all understand: the desire to be better, the fear of failing, the weight of expectations, and the hope that no matter how far you've fallen, you can still find your way back. And that's why Beast works, because it doesn't just show you a fighter's journey, it shows you a human one. So the next time you watch this film, don't just focus on the punches. Look at the pauses, the silences, the moments in between, because that's where the real story lives. That's where the transformation happens. and that's where Beast truly reveals itself. If you enjoyed this deep dive and want more breakdowns like this, hit the like button, share the video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. What did you think about Beast? And which fight film should we break down next? Make sure you subscribe to Cinemagna so you don't miss the next deep dive into the stories behind your favorite films.